Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Ebel. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and join me today for this video where I want to share 3 things I learned from doing a Mary's Mini diet that I didn't realize after I completed the Mary's Mini diet, so I didn't talk about them in my other video. But after about a month after the Mary's Mini is when I started to notice these changes, and I'm like, wow, lesson learned. So the first thing I learned is that I feel best when I eat smaller meals but more often. And now I'm eating like 6 or 7 times a day and I feel so much more energetic. Before I found the starch solution last fall, I was in the habit, like most of us are, of eating 3 meals a day. And I would make these meals big because, you know, it's going to be 4 or 5 hours till my next meal. So I'd eat this big meal and then feel bloated and uncomfortable and like over full and like ready for a nap after every meal. Anyway, before I did my Mary's Mini diet, I was doing the starch solution or McDougall's maximum weight loss. And even when I was eating 50-50 plates, I was still making these like enormous plates that I would feel like too full after I ate. And that's something Dr. McDougall says that really makes sense to me, is to eat until you're satisfied, not stuffed. And what was I doing? And the other part of that is that I felt like I had to eat everything I put on my plate, which is another bad habit that I'm sure a lot of us have. But so I'd make this big 50-50 plate and then I'd eat it all. And it was like, you don't have to eat every piece of food on your plate, Elisha. So here's the thought that's helping me break that habit of finishing everything on my plate. And that's the thought of, we were mostly taught to finish everything on our plate, to not be wasteful. And because there's starving children in other countries, and so you better eat everything on your plate. So here's the thing. Let's say I have like 3 bites of food left on my plate. And if I throw those 3 bites in the trash, that's being wasteful. But if I'm full, if my caloric needs have been met by what I've already ate, and I eat those 3 bites, isn't that also being wasteful? If I'm full and I don't need those extra 3 bites and I'm just giving my digestive system more work to do, I'm now going to have to send this extra food to my fat stores because I don't need these extra calories I've just eaten. I mean, isn't that being just as wasteful as throwing 3 bites of food away in the trash? Isn't it a waste either way? Obviously, Tupperware would be like a third choice, and I'm a big fan of leftovers, so that's, you know, usually the route I go. But that's something that the Mary's Mini diet also really helped me recognize, is when I got to that satisfied point. Because like all I was eating was potatoes mostly, a little bit of vegetable. But there was a couple times when I just like looked at my plate and I'm just like, I don't want any more potatoes. And those would go into the Tupperware for another meal or snack. But I wasn't forcing myself to eat every last bite on my plate. And that is a really good habit that I have now continued after my Mary's Mini. So learning what satisfied feels like has been a total game changer for me. Like somewhere along the lines of my life, I learned that like being full was that like overly full feeling. And now I like really appreciate when I have a plate of food and I'm like, oh, that was the perfect amount of food. I feel so good. I feel like I could go do a physical activity right now. I don't feel like I need a nap, but I'm also not hungry anymore. So I satisfied my need for food without overfilling myself. Like, I am so grateful for that, and to not have that crappy, overfull, bloated feeling. Like, that just feels so uncomfortable. And the other added bonus of eating 6 or 7 times a day is that you get to eat like different things throughout the day. Like when I meal prep now and I can like sample everything throughout the day, like I like that. So the second thing I learned from my Mary's Mini that was also a huge game changer is that I got way more in touch with my actual hunger signals when I used to completely eat by the clock. 10, 2, and 6 were usually my 3 meal times, and then I like a piece of fruit in the morning, maybe in the evening as well. But I was way too rigid with that, and like felt like I was somehow gonna control the amount of food I ate by only eating my 3 meals at those times. But like I just talked about, I would make way too much food. I would have way too big of portions, but because those were my only 3 meals, like I felt like I was allowed to, or I was supposed to, I don't know. So when I was doing my Mary's Mini, I realized after the fact that I had pretty much like let go of those meal times. Most of the days on the Mary's Mini, I was eating 4 plates of food a day. So I wasn't like timing those out at all. And because of the fact that I had taken away like my morning banana, I tended to get hungrier for those first plate of potatoes sooner than I would like on a normal day when I'm doing starch solution or maximum weight loss. And it was actually like a week or 2 after I completed my Mary's Mini diet that like my stomach growled, and I like looked at the clock to see if it was time to eat. And that was when I kind of had the realization of like, time to eat? Like my stomach is physically growling. It's time to eat. It doesn't matter what the clock says. I have struggled with dieting and weight loss for literally over 30 years, and within these last 2 months since my Mary's Mini, just developing these 2 habits of actually eating when I'm hungry and not depending on what the clock says, and eating smaller portions but eating more often throughout the day. Like I feel like I have probably the healthiest relationship that I've ever had with food, and you know. So the third lesson I learned might sound a little negative, and I don't mean it that way, but for me, the Mary's Mini was too restrictive and it led to binging. And so the lesson I learned is simply to not restrict myself. When I restrict, I binge. Whatever benefit I think I'm gonna get by restricting is going to lead to a binge. And that might be restricting like the 10-day Mary Mini of eating mostly potatoes and, you know, a little bit of vegetables. Most of the time what I find myself doing is like restricting in the earlier part of the day, having a smaller breakfast, a smaller lunch, and then when dinner time comes around, I eat the equivalent of 2 dinners. It's like whatever calorie deficit I thought I had by like eating a smaller breakfast and lunch, it's just completely out the window because I'm eating twice as much at dinner. So like, why am I putting myself through these periods of restriction when I know it's gonna lead to a binge? It's not gonna give me any benefit, so I'm just done with that. And I think intermittent fasting made this pattern of restricting and binging so much worse for me. I did intermittent fasting for over 2 years, from 2017 to 2019, progressively like getting longer fasts, and it's a bad spiral. If you have disordered eating of any kind, I just think it's disordered eating wrapped up in a little package called intermittent fasting. Like I got to the point of doing OMAD, which is 1 meal a day. So you fast for 23 hours and then you have your 1 meal. Again, the whole restricting and binging cycle, I just think I know how mentally unhealthy it is for me. I can't imagine that it's mentally healthy for anyone. I would never recommend intermittent fasting to anyone. I think it's gonna lead to eating disorders or really disordered eating. Like truly, what is the difference? If you're not eating for 23 hours out of the day. So I'm just not gonna do that to myself anymore. I think it's the healthiest thing for me. When you're eating a whole food, plant-based, no oil diet, you don't need to count calories, and you can eat all these wonderful fruits and vegetables and starches and not feel deprived. You can feel energetic. It's slightly heartbreaking that the answer to healthy eating has been right there the whole time, but it's just like hidden in plain sight. And that's why I'm really motivated to share my experience with over 30 years of dieting and like suffering mentally because of the way I was viewing my body and looking at food. I wish I would have switched to a plant-based diet so many years ago, but I just gotta be happy that I'm here now and happy that I can share my story with YouTube world. So those are the 3 lessons I learned from my Mary's Mini diet that I didn't really see immediately after the 10 days, but now that 2 months has gone by, I've really formed these good habits and really do feel like I have my Mary's Mini diet experiment to, thank for that. And of course, Dr. McDougall, where would I be without him? So thank you so much for stopping by to watch this video. Don't forget to subscribe and be well.